Ground beef and cantaloupe, two very different foods with one thing in common. They are making people very sick. The latest on 2 recalls and how to protect yourself.
The sentence of the state of Florida against inmate Manuel Valle has been carried out.
The execution of another convicted cop killer, reaction from the victim's family, and what was controversial about this case. In Your Vote 2012, Rick Perry falls from the top of a key poll. Who's taking his place and who else shot up in numbers?
We just assumed that it would never happen.
A miracle baby for one couple who was taken completely by surprise. Your Independent News Network starts right now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Mickle. Welcome to INN News. From meat to melons, you may be asking, what is safe to eat? We begin with another beef recall. Tyson Fresh Meats is recalling more than 130,000 pounds of ground beef over possible E. coli contamination. It's from meat processed at this plant in Emporia, Kansas. The ground beef in question was sold in pre-packaged tubes. Each package bears the establishment code EST245D and the message best before or freeze by September 12, 2011. The affected ground beef was shipped to several grocery stores, including Kroger, Food Lion, and Save-A-Lots in more than a dozen states. Tyson suspects most of the meat's already been eaten, given the use-by dates, but you are urged to check your freezers and return or throw away the product if you have it. Well, it's being called the most deadly U.S. outbreak of a foodborne illness since 1998. And now the FDA is teaming up with state health experts to do checks at stores, wholesalers, and distributors to make sure they know about the Jensen Farms recall, and they've notified their customers and removed the recalled cantaloupes from store shelves. So far, 13 people have died. More than 70 have become ill from eating that tainted fruit. Nanette Sosa explains more about the outbreak and has tips on protecting yourself and your family.
Public health investigators have traced the outbreak to Rocky Ford cantaloupes grown at Jensen Farms in Colorado. Jensen Farms issued a voluntary recall earlier this month and said it remains committed to the highest levels of food safety. The Listeria bacteria is typically found in soil and water. Animals can also carry it. When people get sick from eating food contaminated with Listeria, the infection can lead to fever, muscle aches, and diarrhea. In severe cases, it can lead to convulsions and stillbirths. The people at greatest risk for contracting listeriosis are older adults, pregnant women, babies, and anyone with a weakened immune system. To limit your exposure to listeriosis, the CDC recommends that you avoid eating any Rocky Ford cantaloupes. If you're not sure where a cantaloupe was grown, check with your retailer. The CDC also recommends washing and drying melons before cutting them, washing your hands, knives, and cutting surfaces after preparing uncooked foods, and consuming perishable foods as soon as possible.
Another convicted cop killer has been put to death, this time in Florida. Manuel Valle shot and killed Coral Gables police officer Luis Pena back in 1978. The 61-year-old died by lethal injection last night. Denise Toussaint from our affiliate GTN has reaction.
It was rough. It was rough.
It's been 33 painful years since Coral Gables officer Luis Pena's murder. Many in his family have dedicated their entire lives to bringing his killer, Manuel Valle, to justice. Now they feel their father's soul may finally rest in peace.
At this point, it's beyond closure and it's beyond justice. We finally got revenge on the low-life piece of human waste that murdered our father.
Valle was sentenced to death in 1978 after shooting Officer Pena in the neck during a traffic stop. He's been on death row for 3 decades, appealing his sentence 14 times in the past and even delaying the process one last time on Wednesday afternoon. He was scheduled to be killed by lethal injection at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, but the last-minute appeal to the Supreme Court delayed the execution for 3 more hours.
The sentence of the state of Florida against inmate Manuel Valle has been carried out. He was pronounced dead at 7:14 p.m.
Many people, including a handful of Coral Gables officers who worked with Pena and a group of about 30 protesters, stood somberly waiting outside of the Florida State Prison for hours before the execution. Protesters prayed and held anti-execution signs, many with tears in their eyes, demanding the state repeal the decision.
ACLU feels strongly that Capital punishment is a violation of the 8th Amendment, which is cruel and unusual punishment.
But the family of Officer Luis Pena feels strongly that their prayers have finally been answered, crying tears of joy and relief that justice has been served.
My father's soul can finally be put to rest.
Venice Toussaint reporting for INN News.
A controversial drug was used for the first time in the state during that execution, one his attorney said would cause him pain. Witnesses in the chamber say the convicted killer kicked his leg up after being administered the first injection. They say he had no last words and did not appear to be in any pain. Just last week, Troy Davis was put to death in Georgia for killing a police officer back in 1989. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials score a major roundup for criminals. ICE Director John Morton says they were wanted on a number of serious violations.
These are not people who are making a positive contribution to their communities. They are not the kind of people we want walking our streets.
2,900 offenders were arrested all across the country. More than 1,600 had one or more felony convictions. Well, in your vote 2012, the rise and fall of Republican presidential candidates. The latest Fox poll shows Mitt Romney has reclaimed the top spot in the GOP presidential race. 23% support Romney, now 19% support Texas Governor Rick Perry. He's dropped 10 points in a week. Many blame a poor performance at last week's debate. Herman Cain has shot up in popularity in the polls, now holding the third spot with 17%. He won Florida's straw poll last weekend. Newt Gingrich has 11% support, followed by Ron Paul with 6%. John Huntsman has 4%. Michelle Bachmann and Rick Santorum each have 3%. A raging fire at Shell's largest oil refinery in Singapore sent huge plumes of smoke into the sky today. Witnesses say they could hear explosions coming from the refinery and could even see huge fireballs shooting into the sky. Shell says the fire is contained. The oil company says it's investigating what sparked that blaze. A woman fell over a retaining wall and into the Niagara River just a few hundred feet from the falls. Officials believe she's a tourist because she was at a spot where people gather to take photos. Rescuers rappelled over the wall and used a basket to bring the woman up. No word on her condition or what caused her to tumble over. A Coast Guard crew intercepted a drug sub in the Western Caribbean this month. Here you see the Coast Guard cutter Mohawk approaching the vessel. The drug sub is designed to sink quickly when it detects law enforcement, so the contents of the ship are destroyed. As you can see, this one did sink, but crews found cocaine before it went underwater. The drugs and suspects were turned over to U.S. law enforcement. That case is under investigation. It seems Donald Trump has a problem with wind turbines, especially near his property. Trump has written a second letter to officials in Scotland protesting their plans to build a wind farm near his luxury golf resort in Aberdeen. In his letter, Trump describes the turbines as, quote, big and ugly. The Aberdeen Renewable Energy Group says it's taking all comments seriously. And that's your Global News Now. Well, a tickler, flavor saver, whatever you call it, only one city can brag it's the most mustache-friendly. Plus, stores are hoping to scare up some big Halloween profits, whether the projected numbers are frightful. And speaking of frightful, a cat with two faces. And that's only half the story. These stories and much more next on INN.